singing in the rain. Tomogo sat on a traditional mat that still retained the shape of the goat from which it was derived. Beside her, the old woman of the yard sat on an old blanket, and her one leg stretched out in front of her, and the other tucked underneath her skirts and petticoats. The old lady leaned forward into her small container of snuff, serenely smoothing it between her thumb and forefinger. Tomogo! The old lady was absent-minded in her calling. Tomogo recalled her mind and eyes from the children she had been watching. They were chasing each other around, up and over the new lapa that had been redecorated because of the wedding. Mama, she answered. What is that baby saying to you? Tomogo smiled, looking down at the swelling of her stomach, and her hand moved instinctively to touch her 7 months pregnant belly. Why, this baby is not saying anything, Mama. I'm the one whose feet are aching. Look how swollen they are. A woman is patient, my child. Tomogo smiled because it seemed to her that those were her mother's favorite words. Mama Tomogo had been a short woman whose body had filled out with years of life, almost as if her body was a testament of her life experiences that, however painful and devoid of hope, left one enriched. More than anything, Tomogo remembered their Sundays with fondness. Sundays were spent in preparations. Sunday mornings were spent in preparing to go to church. Mama Tomogo woke everybody in the yard up. They were scurrying to and fro with buckets of water for the day's chores. Tomogo remembered the smell of the water on the soil after Mama Tomogo had sprinkled some before sweeping the yard, and the way Masego, Mama Tomogo's younger sister who lived with them, would be kneeling at the fireside and cooking the soft porridge for their breakfast. She would argue, I thought we were not allowed to work on a Sabbath day. God does not want anybody to starve, not even on a holy day, Mama Tomogo would reply, bending down and squinting her eyes over the church uniform she was ironing or inspecting, the white to make sure it was free of stains. Now, the afternoons were spent in church, preparing the way to heaven. Church was a little one-room, tin-roof building behind the Water Affairs new offices. From meters away, people would gravitate towards the church so that after a while, it would be filled to capacity with its white-clad congregation, both men and women wore the white, ankle-length, loose-fitting dresses as church uniforms over their normal clothes, and navy blue sashes would drape diagonally across the right-hand shoulder, flowing towards the left hand. Outside of the church, there would be little gatherings of shoes in every color and make, from little-sized pink flip-flops to sturdy black boots in need of polish. Just like Moses had to take off his shoes, so the worshipers did to tread into their sacred ground. Very soon, the building would resonate with song and prayer. Hands were held up, eyes closed in ecstasy to give full access to the Lord's glory coming down. Hallelujah. Everybody would be oblivious of the sweat cascading down their bodies and pasting their uniforms to their backs. When the service was finished, after all praises to the Jesus of Nazareth and the greetings in the name of the Holy One who desires for us to live, the women would gather to share tidbits of gossip before exclaiming, "Woo, let me go and see what my children are going to eat." The evenings were occupied by preparations for school the following morning. After caking the black shoes with polish and leaving them out in the dying sun, Tomogo would reluctantly drag herself to the mulberry tree shade where her mother would be waiting with a comb and black wool. With Tomogo sitting on the cool ground between her legs, Mama Tomogo would coax her unmanageable mane of hair into rows of neat plaits. When Tomogo complained and whined, "It hurts," her mother told her, "Being a woman takes patience, my child." Mama Tomogo had been the sort of mother who would beat you up and then let you sulk for a moment, and in a show of tenderness bring you a warm cup of milk to drink. Once, when Tomogo was 8 years old and it had started raining slightly, she and the other children went out into the rain before it became too heavy. Inside, Mama Tomogo was scrambling for buckets and big containers to put outside to get the rainwater. The children's delightful laughter tugged her lips into a smile, and she remembered her own childhood. where the children were dancing in the rain, squelching the new mud in between their toes and singing, "Rain, rain, make me grow. Oh, when will I grow?" Tomogo, unlike the other children, was standing still. Her untainted face turned to the heavens in glee. Her arms were outstretched like the yielding branches of a young tree looking towards the water for strength. From where she was, standing, watching, Mama Tomogo felt a pain in her heart. She wondered, did the children know what they wished for in growing up? Suddenly the rain increased so that from inside the house, Mama Tomogo saw it as an opaque wall of white water swallowing the children up, who nonetheless continued singing and dancing. Mama Tomogo charged from the house, shouting, "Get out of the rain! Come into the house this minute!" The children scattered like frightened chickens, confused and afraid of the fear in her voice. Later, when Tomogo was sitting in her warm jersey and sipping from a bowl full of soft porridge and milk, she said, "Mama, why did you chase us from the rain? We were just playing. Do you want to die from a cold?" Mama Tomogo asked, adjusting the neck of her daughter's jersey. "No." Mama Tomogo sighed and looked at the drizzling remnants of the earlier rain and said, "Even rainwater can be too much for a young plant, my child. Growing plants need water, yes, but not too much too soon." Tomogo sighed contentedly with a fond chuckle at the memory. She patted her stomach, thinking she had grown at long last. For in her society, did not growing and becoming a woman mean having a child? Marriage used to be part of the deal, but these days not every woman was married in spite of the number of their children. And she remembered the days when she and all her playmates had practiced for the time when they would be old and married. The days when, as they waited for their older siblings to come back home, they engaged in a rite that had taken place during their mother's time and their mother's time before them. They played houses, struggling with stones that were heavier than what they were used to. They built little rectangular houses in the back of their mother's yards. Sometimes, inconsiderate older brothers reduced a proud homeowner to tears when they stepped over the walls because they didn't know where the door was. But most of the time, the adults would participate in the children's play, stopping to greet them lengthily and as if they were adults and ask about their health and that of their children. The mother's eyes would be watching critically to see which little mother kept her house neat, because everybody knew that a good, marriageable woman was first noticed at the little houses. Mama Tomogo had been one of those mothers who would look the other way, even as she saw the contents of the sugar basin diminish rapidly when the little houses were in her yard. She was one of those who would, as she passed to get the tap water, pay visits to the little houses and ask what was for lunch. On one occasion, she found the community at the little houses just stirring and fetching water for the morning and preparing breakfast. Her daughter smiled shyly at her and told her that her wife had gone to fetch the water. Mama Tomogo threw her head back and laughed, her stomach shaking merrily. She placed her right hand on her hip and said, "So, you have a wife. Are you a man?" Tomogo had paused, considering, and then nodded hesitantly. Mama Tomogo laughed and the other children along with her. She said, "God made you as a woman. Why do you want to be a man?" And then she stooped to heave her bucket of water up, smiling and shaking her head as she went to the kitchen. The little community started to go into action as Mama Tomogo left. But afterwards, Tomogo brooded for a long time and realized that she did often play the female husband. From then on, she made a conscious effort to play a married woman. Smiling a little sadly, she remembered for years afterwards, she could not recognize herself in that little married woman. But now, as she stretched her legs and tried to see the whole of her feet behind her belly, she felt herself at long last part of the society of womanhood. Before, even with her friends and age mates, she always felt left out, apart from them in some way. Unlike them, She refused to let giggles escape her mouth when the young men patted her buttocks. She hated the way their hands slid over the swelling of her buttocks and the way they lingered and squeezed the meat there so familiarly. While her friends giggled and slapped the man's hands away, she glared at them so furiously. They soon learned not to let their hands reach the borders of her body. And even though she had liked the camaraderie of sitting far from the elders and whispering secrets about menses, and she just felt less enthusiasm in discussing boys and the endless pleasures they apparently provided. This explained why she was the last of her friends to have a child, and the one to have her first child at 28. And she enjoyed the pampering that went along with being pregnant. I mean, everybody was concerned about her and how she felt and asked her to rest. And in ceremonies like the wedding for which they were preparing, she sat in the shade with the old women and watched everybody else working. The old lady who was at her side now, Mama Bogo, was the grandmother to the bride and was related to her by virtue of being her aunt from her grandfather's senior family. She was said to be good with children's and expectant mothers' ailments. Although advancing age had dimmed her eyesight, she never failed to recognize a person by their voice and was reputed to have massaged the stomach of a pregnant woman once and then told her, "This baby is not sitting properly." After which the doctors at Sagoma Memorial Hospital discovered the baby was in a bad position. She said lightly to Tomogo, "Make sure you don't eat any eggs. You know that eggs will burn you when you deliver, just the way an egg burns a chicken." Tomogo smiled her confusion because the nurse at the clinic had told her eggs would be good for the baby. They would build the baby's bones, she had said. She shuffled to rest her back against the wall of the house by which she sat. She saw her friend, Kabilano, fixing the ladder by the side of the hut whose roof needed mending. Kabilano pushed the bottom of the ladder gently into the earth and raked up the soil with her toes to steady it. Tomogo knew that all the young men had gone to fetch the wood for the fire they would cook the wedding feast with, so she wasn't surprised to see Kabilano gingerly climbing up the rungs of the ladder. What surprised Tomogo was the way in which she reacted when she caught sight of Kabilano's thigh under her brown German print skirt. Tomogo caught her heart beating faster, and she wondered at the vague wish in her mind for the skirt to ride up further. She immediately looked away, disgusted with herself. She had never reconciled herself to the enjoyment of anything sexual. Her encounters with the man who had given her the baby were affairs that she endured in patience, the way a woman is supposed to. I mean, even in daylight, she felt mildly embarrassed in his presence, like a child whose father caught him peeing at the door. She wondered at the tiny spark of warmth and pleasure between her thighs as she, at the sight of the thighs of Kabilano. Immediately, her newfound sense of kinship with the woman vanished, like fog in the powerful presence of a dawning sun. She remembered and understood the way she had liked to watch the fullness of the woman's breast in their blouses, and the way she had always enjoyed their warm company, even to the company of her man. The way she enjoyed their quick and full laughter. The way their laughter made them throw their heads back and wipe tears away with a resigned shake of the head. The way their hands moved to their mouths to block away an overzealous chuckle now and then. The old lady at her side stirred, gathered her skirts, jabbed one knee onto the blanket before getting the rest of her body up. Slowly. "Let us get inside," she said. "Smells like rain." Tomogo suddenly felt like a little girl, all over again. She wished she could join the scores of excited children scrambling into the rain. She wished she could stand in the rain and feel it sliding down her body. She wished the rain would wash her confusion down to her feet so she could squelch it in between her toes. She wished she too could ask the rain to make her grow up. Singing in the